It might shock you, but picking a game to cover isn't always easy. So I'm thankful for the moments of serendipity which happened to serve as inspiration, like Namco announcing the 30th anniversary of the release of Air Combat, the first in the Ace Combat series. Turns out, this has been a game I have wanted to cover for quite some time, and well, this is as good a reason as any to sit down, fire it up and give it the old look at. Air Combat was released for the PlayStation in 1995. A Japanese release happened a few months after the console's launch, but it arrived as one of the first titles when hitting the Western markets later that year. Story-wise, things are rather clear-cut. You're part of a mercenary squad brought in to help quell an insurgency which has seen the government overthrown. That's pretty much what you're given when the game opens up and you get the initial introductory briefing kind of matter. That being said, there has been some retconning made which tries to bring it in line with the larger, strange real world of the later games. But the events undertaken here don't really figure into that history the way the stories of those later games do, so I don't really follow it all that much. It shouldn't surprise you that the only updates you'll receive about this story are little tidbits as part of your mission briefings. In other words, it's very much a case of ship in, do your job, then ship out. Well, that's fine by 90s gaming standards. Coming to Air Combat, having played later games in the Ace Combat series, truly makes it feel rather empty to me. I mean, story-wise, there's no setbacks, challenges, or characters to follow. You just fly mission after mission until it's all over. Heck, this even extends to the person who delivers your briefings. He's got no background at all in the game, he's just a disembodied voice. I'm sure I'm reading too much into this after all, because Air Combat really wants to give you that feeling of flying into the danger zone, being a top-notch ace, and so a fully formed story might just weigh it all down. But all that is kind of tempered by how Air Combat handles its missions. While the later games just move you from mission to mission in a linear list, between cutscenes and delivering that story, here you've got a theatre map which shows all the missions you've unlocked and allows you to move from one to the next to continue. You don't just pick from a list, you move a little squadron indicator around. I just think it's neat watching that indicator move between operations until you pick the one that you want to tackle. The briefings themselves are delivered primarily through voiceover, informing you of all the objectives and the situation, while a map of the area is shown in the background, highlighting threats and what your objectives are. The choice to use a high-resolution mode for the screen really adds character here. It makes it something that wouldn't be out of place on the PC simulators I was playing at the time. It feels very comparable to that, and it looks really great despite, the interlace flickering. Once you've listened to that briefing, you've got the choice to browse through the projected forces. You get a rough idea on what you're facing and what their skills are. The pilots that you're facing will be increased in skill as you go through the game because things have got to be harder after all. And once you've beaten the first few missions in the game, you'll also get the opportunity to deploy off a Wingman for some of them. They aren't cheap, so it might not always be feasible to do so, and your mileage might vary on how effective they actually are. You do have plenty of options for them though. Hiring a pilot based on their skill level, and their preferred fighter, and also you can give them a general mission order, like their priority. Do you want them to cover your tail, go for the target, or let them off the leash and do whatever? I wish you had more control of that in-game, something we saw with later games in the series, but the support can be handy, even if again, your mileage might vary on how well it's actually used. Before taking off though, the last thing you need to do is select which fighter you're going to fly, and it too is where Air Combat does its own thing compared to what is sort of the main flow of later games in the series. Before choosing a mission, you can dive into the hangar to buy and sell aircraft. As you progress through the campaign, more become available to buy, providing you've got the funds to hand. Funds that you earn by downing enemies and completing missions. The big difference with the later games is what happens should you be taken out. That particular plane is lost, and you're going to have to select another when retrying and maybe rebuy it, but you can't always do that right away. Of course, should you run out of available aircraft, it's game over for you. Which, in a way, makes things kind of interesting, particularly if you're a fan of roguelike runs. I feel it sets up an interesting challenge in that you might want to just do that. See how far you can go, buying planes, losing them, whatever, until you run out. See if you can actually beat that whole campaign without running out of airplanes. Personally though, I don't have the patience for that. I'd rather just go back to my save game and reload my last save, even if only so I could keep flying my favourites. Something I found really unique with the aircraft roster though is that, unlike later games in the series, there are only real-world aircraft featured here, none of those fancy sort of highly advanced prototypes or whatever that you get. Each is rated in one of 5 areas: offense, defense, stability, power, and mobility. The manual doesn't really do much to explain what it all means, and I'll admit, I really found it hard to feel how each of these variables made planes feel different when in the air. Some cases I felt they were a little off compared to real world use, like the A-10 is far more maneuverable than it, I believe it actually is in real life, at least in other sims that I've played with it. When taking flight, I guess what really surprised me is how much of the series DNA is present right from the start, even if it is just a little rough around the edges in some of the execution. Weapon-wise, you have the choice of guns or generic heat-seeking missiles. Missiles do require you to be closer than I'd expect to lock, and they're no catch-all. You can't just let it lock and fire away. You really need to watch your positioning in order to make sure that you don't waste them. Even though you have quite a lot of them to hand, this isn't a simulator. But you've got to be precise about it. You want to get the turret and wait for the little fire text to appear. As for the guns, I found them trickier to make good use of. Part of that, or a large part of it anyway, is just the sluggishness I found the fighters were to turn, which made small adjustments when you're trying to ease up, when you're very close to an enemy and trying to ease up on there, a little too fiddly for my liking. Now this is where things get a little weird. So unsurprisingly, I'm playing the PAL version of this, and I've captured some on my PAL PlayStation. I had a quick play of the US version under an emulator, just for curiosity's sake, and it didn't feel as sluggish. I don't know if it's just the old 16% PAL conversion speed loss in effect that makes these planes feel weird to fly, but it was, I don't know, I can't fully explain it, but it felt off to me, and it made using the guns a little more frustrating than perhaps they should be. Would I say it ruined the thrills of engaging in enemy battles, this gun issue? Oh, not really, but it has stuck in my mind quite a bit. Again, especially as later games seem to not feel as heavy in that regard. They felt more like the highly expensive fighters that you were flying. They felt far more maneuverable. Missions also do continue the trend in laying down the groundwork you expect for later games too. Many of them are simply focused on taking out a number of hostile aircraft, ranging from fighters to bombers and other aerial threats, before you run out of fuel, which serves as your time limit. Though I do prefer an actual time limit rather than that. Something a little more definitive than abstract. You'll also participate in a few ground strikes. With one of them in particular, I feel stands out for me as like being a really cool mission. In this particular mission, you're tasked with taking out an oil refinery and a few oil fields that surround it. Whilst the main refinery is plotted on your mission map and shown in the briefing, you have to locate the individual fields by following oil pipelines. Tracing them by sight alone, whilst evading the anti-air defences and enemy fighters is a challenge, but one that I feel skillful flying does get you through. It was a really rewarding mission to actually get through this one and solve it and just work out the little tricks to find those targets. Now, of course, it wouldn't be part of the Ace Combat series without a mission where you're required to take out a target you can only reach by flying through a tight, twisty canyon. In fact, Air Combat gives you two of them, keeping low and safe from enemy surface-to-air missiles, while avoiding the walls was quite a challenge, especially because you can't slow down or adjust your speed in order to get through tight sections. But that's all part of the fun, isn't it? Getting through fast enough, being quick enough on the draw to avoid the threats between you and the objectives. It's really what makes you feel like an ace in this game. And trust me, air combat really does deliver on those feelings. Of course, it also wouldn't be part of the series if there wasn't a surprise super weapon, which you need to engage as the final objective. It's not as intense a fight as you would see from the later games, but it really did test my skills. Whether evading enemy fire from the defences of the airborne platform, or the fighters it's launching to intercept you, or being able to line up and take out those engines to claim the final victory, win the war, and end the threat. Funnily enough, there's really only one thing that really got on my nerves when playing air combat, and it happens when you take damage. Having your plane report alert body damage after each hit is fine, but when it replays it several times for each hit, kind of gets on your nerves really quick. In fact, I'd say it puts it on the level of irritation only Cybermorph's "Where did you learn how to fly?" could manage. And I think that's an impressive feat to achieve. I mean, look, let's face it, if that is not a good reason to learn how to properly evade incoming fire and incoming missiles, I don't know what is. Just to save your ears from that being played repeatedly. As a first generation game for the console hardware, the PlayStation hardware, air combat manages to offer some pretty impressive graphical thrills, but more importantly, manages to keep it running all at a fairly good speed. There are some solid artistic choices made with the colours, particularly with some of the enemy fighters, that really helps you distinguish them when they're in battle. I think this is really important because all but one mission here is conducted during the day, so having them stand out in the sky really helps you, know what you're doing, know what you're targeting when you're engaging. I think it's a little detail that really is appreciated. Considering the reputation Namco had with soundtracks, I mean, look at games like Ridge Racer and some of their other arcade games at the time, I'm a little sad that Air Combat's soundtrack doesn't hit those same highs. I mean, it hits the vibe, the rocking thing that you expect of, anything taking influence from like Top Gun, but compared to later games in the series, it doesn't have anything that's memorable, that strikes out, that just sticks in your mind the way that several other pieces do. I think coming to mind of Zero from Ace Combat Zero for its final mission, as a good example of that. I'm not surprised by this. I mean, you're shipping on a CD and these tracks are all as Red Book audio. So there's only so much data that you can have to hand. And it just makes me feel a little sad over it. Honestly, I think this is a lot of what my feelings are when I reflect on Air Combat. I enjoyed playing it. I had a good time playing it. It was quite a good challenge. I played it through on normal. It took me maybe 3 to 4 hours to beat if I'm looking at the time of all the recorded footage I have. And I had a great time. But it is overshadowed by its successes in a way that shouldn't be a surprise. There's not only from more advanced hardware, but for better use of the hardware. Like, it's only a couple of years between this and the second game, and there is such a jump in detail and presentation that's just incredible. It just shows that the team are doing better. And honestly, for me, some might disregard stories of those later games as being a bit silly and a bit over the top, but I kind of love them. And not really having one here does sort of let it down a bit. It makes it feel a little soulless. Thankfully though, Air Combat isn't a long game. The campaign has 17 missions, and technically, you don't have to play them all. I did. And they're all fairly breezy to play through. You don't have the kind of half-hour slogs that you get in some of the later games. And whilst it could challenge you, it's not exceedingly difficult. At least with my experiences, again, playing at normal difficulty. And if you do want a copy, it doesn't seem to be that expensive to find discs of it, so hey, sit there and have a blast. I don't think it's going to get a reissue digitally, which is a shame, but I think it's easy enough to play if you want to play it. Personally though, I'm pretty happy to have made the time to sit down with Air Combat, as, like I said in the intro, it's one I really have wanted to cover for quite some time. Now, I'll admit, I think I have come at this the wrong way, not by starting with it and playing through the games, but by playing those later games first and coming back to it. But I can appreciate that so much of the foundations that made those later games fantastic is laid down here. The game flow and feeling is still down here, and I think it's still worth playing for that. And I guess maybe it is just a pretty long-winded way for me to say, yeah, it's 30 years since Air Combat hit home systems. It's an amazing game to check out, and I think it's still got some value to play and acknowledge for that, you know. Yeah, the later games are probably what I think you should play first. The reason the PS2 games are regarded so highly is for good reason, but I think you're not going to waste your time playing with this, providing you come in with your expectations managed. But I guess that's it for me, so what else is there for me to say than to just thank you all very much for watching.